conflict is coming. The circumstances behind the initiative's ventures are coming to a head. New unscheduled arcs are arriving. The Scourge is striking back. Your defeat of the Archon has attracted the attention of a far more dangerous force, and the cluster's ancient technology is far more than it first appeared. As Pathfinder, you have already begun to shape the history of Andromeda around you, and so now you must explore beyond the cluster, decide who to trust, find allies or serfs, turn enemies into friends or reluctant vassals, establish bases and appoint their leaders, and all before the inevitable nexus. You will lead your people in this greatest age of discovery. You will choose who to recruit or who to dismiss, how your team is outfitted, what objectives to pursue. Discover and implement your choice of new upgrades to your ship, weapons, and armor, and in spite of resistance from even those close to you, unite the galaxy in its time of need. And this time, your choices do matter. Will you create an empire, a federation, or perhaps something greater than both? Mass Effect Andromeda, Extraordinary Horizons. Coming soon.
An effective story is important for more than just movies nowadays. Even in games, you need a good narrative to be effective. Take Mass Effect Andromeda. It was a decent idea, but it had poor execution. How would a game series be saved? The storyboard answers. At the time of recording, Mass Effect Andromeda 2 may not even happen due to poor performance. Granted, there were a few missteps, and perhaps it was a bit ambitious, but the key elements were there, and there is just so much potential, we shouldn't give it up. If enough people push for it and they manage to get a good enough continuation, it's possible we may get another one. Following is an example of how we could work with it. Remember, this is just a rough draft. Mass Effect Andromeda was essentially about exploration, hence the protagonist being the Pathfinder. But there was that threat about the threat of the Ket, so that would have to be dealt with, as well as the Rim Tech and the Scourge, which was not created by either, but affects both, as well as the Angara and their relationship to the Remnant. He found issues with the combat engine and the level ups, but I think Mass Effect 2's combat engine was the best, and as far as the choices one could make, Mass Effect 1 was pretty much the best. If we combine that, we have a pretty good starting point. While the Renegade and Paragon arcs died with Shepard, it does leave room for a different type of system. One could call it the ruthless, compassionate, logical, emotional, direct and indirect, sneaky and bold system that could provide even more depth to character. Couple this with a hidden and known system, that is to say, whether or not the rest of the galaxy knows about the events in particular, we could get a really deep game going. For example, lies and when or whether or not they are learned about would really mix things up. Within this new framework, there would be at least 6 core groups that would generally be easy to ally with amongst the members. There would be 3 ancient and 3 modern groups. The modern groups would be 1. The Milky Way core group, 2. The anti-Ket factions of Andromeda, and the Ket faction of Andromeda. The ancient groups would be 1. The Reapers, who didn't arrive with galaxy-ending firepower but are still a big threat, and 1. The Ket would be obliged to fight regardless. Then, of course, within Andromeda, we have the Remnant and the race that created the Scourge. Both of these Andromeda ancient races could only be represented by their tech, and your use of that tech could determine what the other groups think of you and whether or not they trust you, or we may even find representatives of each. Additional story add-ons could include the Pathfinder of the Turians being a Turian Cabal, or one of the rare Turians that has biotics, as well as other Turians being Cabals, and at least a few Asari that have no biotics. It's possible even though it's not explored in the original trilogy. There could be the ability to have a slightly more dynamic team, from solo up to 5, which would allow for a different feel and some more interplay and development between the characters, and different methods to solve problems, i.e., more than one way to complete a mission and stuff like that. We could also add on the ability to go on missions with other Pathfinders, part of helping the other races and such. And perhaps some space combat, if that can be done without hurting the rest of the story. Not really needed, but if it works, That leads us to the main spiel, Chapter, or Act 0. This would be the training and introductory chapter. Prior to the start of this game, a modern Mass Effect relay would be finished, and we would also have better details about the Quarian arc and a new cluster. This motivates the Nexus to send you to uncover news and, if possible, recover the arc itself. Then, you had to figure out a way back. Most of the crew you recruited last time has chosen to stay behind and work on their own projects, as this mission is likely to take a few years. But you do have Callow, Suvi, Cora, perhaps a few others, and a potentially disposable squad mate or mates. These quote disposable squad mates would be there in case the mission goes south. Yes, there would be permadeath. That would be part of the decisions matter thing. That brings us to Chapter 1. Upon arrival back at the Nexus, which is a few years later, you learn that the RIM tech has begun to act quirky, as it's reported. As you are the one that figured it out in the first place, you are really the only one that has a hope of figuring this out. You could re-recruit Jal and perhaps a female Angara, PB, or someone else. It is possible that you will anger some or all of these people on this mission. You end up figuring out how to fix the tech, which leads to potential advances or cool upgrades to your ship, drive system, and or weapon, and or shields. You only have so much that can fit on the ship, so you have to make a decision. Which leads to Chapter 2. After fixing the RIM tech, the Scourge starts to react and unscheduled arcs start to arrive. There would be at least 3. 1. A Geth arc, which would scare the Quarians. 2. A Rachni arc, which would piss off the Krogan. Finally, a Reaper arc, which would piss off everybody else. Maybe we would get other arcs from other Milky Way species that we may not have known about. Depending on the choices made in the original trilogy, the Geth, Rachni, and Reaper and or other species could be completely different. For example, if the Rachni Queen was allowed to live and freed from the Reapers, you would have a good chance at a true alliance. If it's the Breeder, she will probably betray you, unless you ally with the Reapers. If Shepard merged organic with synthetic, the Reapers would be friendly. If Shepard killed organics or refused to make the decision, the Reapers would be out to start the cycle in Andromeda. And if Shepard killed the synthetics, the Reapers would be out for blood and to rebuild and go back to finish the job. If Shepard sided with the Geth or managed to broker peace with them and the Quarians, the Geth would be friendly. If Shepard sided with the Quarians, the Geth could simply be looking for self-determination, or perhaps the idea of retribution was added to the consensus. And so many more possibilities. You have to figure out how to deal with this, which alliances to maintain, and then search for information about the Scourge's recent changes. Of course, the initiative could have an insurance policy, i.e. sending other arcs, such as Arc Bast, the War Arc, and Arc Toth, the Science Arc, and you would have to choose which one to save. Dun dun dun! Then, Chapter 3. Information on the Scourge is rare in this cluster, so it's decided you must start to explore other clusters within Andromeda and place more Mass Effect relays. Perhaps we would discover new faster-than-light tech. These modern relays would have to be sent out, perhaps in pieces, and then set up for ships that don't have your improved drive system to get back and forth and establish new bases, meet new Andromeda species to potentially subjugate or ally with, and each base commander choice you make affects how the other races feel about you. For example, which species you do appoint more often and whether or not they like or trust that species' gender or abilities, like engineers, soldiers, biotics, etc., and how your squad reacts for the same reasons. And of course, how this is run, like, is it a military or corporation? Is it going to be for science or domination? There would be at least 5 clusters that could be explored and made use of, but you only have so many modern relays and components, so you have to choose wisely. This next act could potentially be the beginning of Mass Effect Andromeda 3 or the continuation of Mass Effect Andromeda 2, depending on how much stuff is put into the previous chapters. Chapter 4. At some point, information on the Scourge and the Archon's superiors is learned, and the true nature of the Scourge is discovered, and its creator's intentions is learned. So now you must decide whether to help the Ket or let them fend for themselves. One of them could be recruited, even without you allying with them, and these decisions all affect how Jal and the rest of the Angara feel about you. Chapter 5. The initiative's true purposes and/or intentions are revealed and must be dealt with. There would be potential tandem missions, and either-or missions are likely to occur. Perhaps this would be starting earlier, so having a big party selection would be very appropriate. These decisions that are made and how you use each of your teams and teammates would affect how everyone sees you. Then, Chapter 6. The Final Showdown. No further details. Most of the opening chapters would be to fill out issues that just didn't get addressed fully in the first game, so that's why I have more descriptions for them than the later chapters. And now I'll take this time to point out some choices that one would have to consider. All races will and should be possible for alliances, but some will be harder to secure than others, and some may just be waiting to betray and/or use you. 2. Each race would have potential different pros and cons. Convincing each would take different concessions, but at the base level, choices between races would potentially include, unless you have high persuasion and have laid appropriate groundwork, Ket and all other species, Quarian or the Geth, Rachni or the Krogan, Reaper or the Ket, Scourge Makers or the Remnant, the Reapers and the Remnant, the Reapers and the Milky Way Galaxy and residents, the Scourge and non-Ket Andromeda, the Remnant and the Scourge, and others based on new Andromeda races and potentially other Milky Way species that would have survived. 3. Each race that you could recruit would have at least one representative that could be put on your team. Note, if you secure a Reaper alliance, you may get Geth, Banshees, Marauders, Husk, or etc. based on what the Reaper's perception is what you would like to use. If you generally send tanks into battle to control crowds while you take care of other threats, you could get a Brute. If you like to snipe from a distance, you may get Marauders. If you secure an alliance with the Geth, you would instead of a person have a choice which platform the Geth uses instead of weapons, which would be based on unlockables, purchasables, etc., and it would be effectively unkillable, but it would remember how often and for what reasons you sent it to die, etc. If we are going to produce more potential squad mates, we may need an inner circle of less than disposable people to help keep a cohesive storyline, and perhaps a change out in the Nexus or other hub areas would be needed. 4. Of course, each decision made for squad mates and installation leaders would have repercussions on future volunteers and their disposition and how the other races feel about you. 5. Each time a squad mate dies, others from that person's race may volunteer based on how you have used that squad mate in the past. 6. You could at any point you choose use the squad mate pool as leaders and their squad mates for tandem missions or other missions that you decide you don't have time for. Their loyalty and perception of you will of course impact success rates. 7. No matter how well you unite the galaxy and how well you are viewed by those empowered, allied races will have resistance and non-allied will petition for help with or without intent to help you in return. Resistance from non-allied races may want to work with you. Their numbers and reasons and dispositions will be based on what you do, of course, so choose wisely. 8. Every single choice has pros and cons that can affect the future. For example, you will take hits if people don't like the decisions you made, and some others may be more inclined to work for you if they like the decisions you make. 9. Alliances can be brokered and broken at any time, within reason, based on the choices you make and how they are viewed by the peoples, so be warned. While you are on other missions, others may be needed to defend key outposts or deploy from key hubs, and they may prefer to wait in certain places too, so something to think about. With the right story, many things can be explained in a satisfactory manner. Hopefully, we can get a new game worthy of being called Mass Effect. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Storyboard. Please like and subscribe and share. Questions, comments, concerns, bitches, gripes, and complaints, please note them in the comments section.